All right. And I believe we are live. Deshawn, can I ask you just to mute your mic
Oh
unless you're
yes.
speaking?
Oh yeah.
Thanks.
Okay. Do you hear feedback?
No, just a little bit of background noise.
Oh okay. Yeah. Let
Oh,
me
I don't
see.
hear it anymore. It's gone.
Okay. All right. Yes. But thank you, Sabrina, for having me. Thank you.
Thanks so much for coming on. Hey guys, I just want to give shout out to people in the chat. Hello, Lawrence. Always nice to see you.
Thank you
Hi,
for joining.
Brett. All the way from Scotland. Okay,
Oh
cool.
wow.
All right,
That's a
guys.
wow.
Welcome to the Savvy Sab Show on Fred Hampton Leftist podcast. I'm your host, Sabrina Salvati. I have a special guest today. His name is Deshawn Coy, and he is the founder of the Original People's Party. Welcome, Deshawn.
Hey, thank you, Sabrina. I appreciate you giving me the opportunity. Thank you.
Anytime. Thanks so much for coming on. I know that I am not the easiest person to get a hold of, so
Yeah, I
thank you
know. No,
for thanks so
you have
much
a
for
growing
being
channel, so that's
patient.
a good thing. You have a growing channel, so it's a good thing.
um in the beginning, like, can you tell everyone, like, I have your website, I'm going to pull that up too, but can you
hmm
tell everybody, like, how did this all start, the Original People's Party?
Um, I started this originally like a year ago, I think around August last year, where I kind of like culminated all these different ideas that I came up with. Because the reason why it originally started is that I kind of got into a place where I was trying to find like a kind of like an answer for us as Black African people, or as Black people in this country, trying to find a solution to the problem. So, for example, I got into certain conscious community. I'm not sure if you're familiar with that, or like starting to learn about leftist politics and stuff like that. So it kind of took me like the journey really started like 2017, 2018, but it kind of culminated last year where I kind of like after years of just reading, studying, and kind of getting information of like how to develop a tangible solution that provides material benefits to the people and create an alternative without having to depend on the white power structure or Wall Street or different stuff like that. So that's kind of where I've kind of gotten to with this solution and coming up with the three agendas of the Original People's Party. The reason why, the meaning of the word Original People's Party is also, I forgot, the meaning of is a reference to us as Black African people being the original man and woman of Earth. That's the primary reason. Because as us from Africa, we're the original people. That's kind of the name of it. So we're primarily a Pan African organization. Mhm.
Awesome. You got a shout out from Cryptian. He said, "What's up, Deshawn? You got things going in the right direction. This is exactly what we need to be doing right now."
Thank you, Critician. I hope I pronounced that right.
I hope I do too. I don't I know that, like, sometimes I'm like, I don't know if I pronounce this correctly.
Mm.
Um
It sound
so
like it sound like from Superman, like kryptonite. It kind of reminded me. Yeah,
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 it does.
kryptonite. Yeah.
That is so true.
Yeah.
So I want to know, so you were tuned in this past, presidential election.
Mm-hmm.
Um when you look back at the candidates that were running for president, mainly the ones in, like, the Democratic Party,
Mm-hmm.
well, basically the ones in the Democratic Party, what were some of the things that you feel were missing in reference to what African Americans need in this country?
Well, I think the first one is like which was a more urgent issue was maybe like regarding let's say police brutality, trying to define like actual tangible bills. But none of the candidates that I saw on the campaign trail was really being specific about that. It always kind of curtailing or like trying to sidestep the issue as police brutality. And the second one was reparations. Reparations. That was something that I kind of see that they all consistently, except I think one of the names was Marion Williamson. She was the only one who was really touting these things. And those are the primary issues that I was thinking of doing. I've seen that they was avoiding and not addressing. Yeah, that was pretty much it.
No, I agree. And another one that a lot of people don't know about because they didn't ask her about it, which I thought was done on
Mhm.
purpose. but that was Tulsi Gabbard actually had a reparations plan as well. And they never asked her about it. They tried to ignore her and avoid her as much as possible when she was on the debate stage. And I found that to be suspect.
Yeah, I think they did that intentionally because they don't really want to address the issue of reparations. Because if if reparations was to actually be passed, it would set a very bad, in my opinion, it would set a very bad precedent for all of the European powers and the Western powers who were involved in this slave trade, and then it would set like a geopolitical precedent where all of the people in the Caribbean or in Africa would demand the same thing. So that's why I think it's done intentionally, where even someone as progressive as Bernie Sanders, if you noticed in the primaries, when he was first asked that question in 2019, in the earlier primaries, he was just sidestepped it and talked about all ambiguous type of programs, which is important, but particularly when it comes to reparations, I noticed him and others, even what's her name, Elizabeth Warren. Elizabeth Warren, it kind of all sidetracked that thing, and I noticed that was potentially there was a reason for that. But yeah, I totally agree with you. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think that one disappointment that I had with Bernie's campaign, and I was a Bernie supporter, but one thing I felt like he failed on was he didn't have a reparations plan. And
Mm-hmm.
then like later on, I think he tried to add something in, but it was just at that point it was too late because everybody saw that he didn't have a reparations plan. So I
Mm-hmm.
found that to be problematic. And I felt like a lot of people in indie media, they didn't want to admit that.
Mm-hmm. And I think maybe the reason also why him, similar to similar to all of the other establishment, because I don't think he's an establishment candidate, but to other establishment people, I think it would have turned people off, his white progressives or liberal colleagues. It would have turned them off if he embraced that type of policy, because I think something is implicit where they know that they don't want to address that type of issue. So that's why I kind of I kind of I don't believe it's not something that he was going to really address. And in the early primaries, when someone's telling you what they believe in and they don't agree with, they already said it. He already said it like in the fall of 2019, or early primaries. I remember that, and he already said it before. So that's why I'm just like, you're not really going to be serious about a program. And then any type of program that he was going to produce is going to be part of a multi coalition, type of programs that came in, part of his if he became president. So when it comes to reparations, I was pretty sure, like after he said those things, then he kind of sized up those things. For me personally, I just kind of knew what he was about.
Right.
Mhm.
There's a question for you in the chat from Independent Mini United. Real question: are you for mandated jobs?
Mandated jobs. Well, I think that depends if you're talking about from the public sector, like from the government. I think if you're talking about outside of what the agenda that we're doing with OPP, I was thinking that's something, yeah, the government should step in to do something like that, because as we're going to talk about later on when I talk explaining the agenda, as things start to automate, the capitalist system that kind of runs this country, or basically the Western world, they're not going to be needed. There's not going to be a need for labor or stuff like that. So the private sector is going to continue to automate, continue to do these automate, have machines replacing humans. So little by little, I think it's something that I do agree with that question. The proposal, it would be some type of mandated thing. But I'm going to explain later on how the OPP agenda, the original People's Party agenda, is going to help create jobs and create an alternative to to not have to depend on the government, or let's say I forgot that plan. Oh, sorry, I thought other thoughts on top of my head, but yeah, I'll I'll explain later on.
Okay, cool. There's a comment from Black in the Empire. Bernie at one point said that there are better ways to address reparations than cutting a check. Um, I'm going to respond to this really quick, and then I'm going to, pass the mic to you, Deshawn.
Hmm.
Black in the Empire. So here's the thing about that. I will say, for me, I think when I'm thinking of reparations, yes, a check is one of those things, but
Yes.
that's not enough. We need more than just a check. It's a lot of things that need to be fixed and need to change for Black people in this country. Number one, the public education system has to change. If you really want to, and a lot of people don't want to talk about this, but it's a fact. And I work in the education system, so I've seen it day in and day out. We have to stop funding public schools based off of property taxes. It's inherently racist. It's a slap in the face to Black people. You're basically saying to people that live in these poor communities, and I went to school in Baltimore for a year, so I know. And I saw the difference from going to school in the suburbs in, I guess you would call it a mixed, diverse community, and then going to school for a year in Baltimore in the inner city. I saw the differences, the disparities between the school systems. And it's really not fair to basically say to people that if you're poor, you live in a poor neighborhood, you don't get the opportunity to have a decent education. And that's not right. Going to schools where that are heavily like policed. Imagine, like, this is the thing, and Awkward brought this up from 10 Demands of Justice. He said you have a lot of kids in this country that are going from a community that is over policed, and then they go to school that is also over policed. So for me, reparations, yes, I think we should have a check, but I think, like, to Black and Empire's point, I think we need more than just that. I think there's other things in the community that need to be fixed, and you need to fix the systemic problems that are in this country that are targeting Black people. What's your take, Deshawn?
To piggyback off what you just said about the taxes thing, later on you're going to see how, because I have a potential idea in the future when we start doing the currency project later on, how we're going to solve the tax issue where we have to depending on private industries for taxes to fund those type of things, whether it's property taxes or stuff like that. I have a potential solution for that problem. But I totally agree with you on that point, what you were saying. And then also to add on, I was thinking also political prisoners, that's also one. Our ancestors or our elders who are still in prison for the war on drugs, or certain political prisoners that we have up there. That's one. And then also just the psychological type of trauma that we've been going through. I think that's something that should be also added as part of reparations. And then also legal protection. I think also certain legal protections from the law. I think that should be also added. So it's not just a check. A check should be added with that, but also a very comprehensive bill that should be added, just like similar to the Jews, and similarly like this year when they had the Asian bill that came out, the Asian bill. So I think something similar to that for the people who helped build this country. And and if you are a white person or a white liberal or whatever, and you say that you are ally and stuff like that, and you do want to provide like means or like corrective action, this is something that you should or willing to support. And that's something that I saw on your platform that you and I think his name Nick. Nick. Nick?
Yes, socialist
Yeah,
MMA.
yeah. I was seeing you guys talking about that last week, and like these are type of things that we should expect from your white liberal or progressive allies to actually have a corrective action. A corrective program. That's what I'm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There's a super chat. I'm gonna go to the super chat, and then I'm gonna I want to share my screen to show your website. Chris Bedford said, maybe get white progressives on board with reparations with pragmatic as well as moral argument. Core idea, need Black folks to win on other progressive policies. Better chance if you address this key demand. What's your take on that, Deshawn?
I'm not sure. Well, I have to me and personally, like in just in general, I have doubts whether you're progressive or liberal that they would even get on board with it. Even because I was remember last week when you guys were having that discussion about, I think it was Kyle Kalinske who was making the argument that it's not popular voting, like in terms of like the surveys or something like that. I personally just have doubts in general that they would even get on board with that type of program without being politically pushed to do so, like where they may lose the vote in a 4-year in a general election or something like that. I don't really see that even happening. So until we as Black people, we would have to organize our vote first to kind of push them to that thing. Because to me, certain arguments that Kyle Kalinske and others or something like would say, they would have to wait years until the polling gets high enough to decide, okay, I want to get on board on this stuff. So that's why I say, in general, I don't have that much faith in waiting and stuff like that. And then we've been waiting since the end of this civil rights era to finally come up with a solution to this thing. So, yeah.
Right. And it definitely doesn't help to have people like him that have large platforms preaching that message to people that basically like, well, this isn't popular. And, I don't live my life based on what's popular.
Yeah. And do we really want to wait another 50 years? Like we already seen 50 years of like integration and waiting on symbolism, certain tangible or crumbs to come down. But I think we can't wait on that. Wait on that, in my opinion, at least.
Okay. So I want to go to the website, and there was
You can, yeah.
about. Okay, so I just want to read this for everyone. Founded by Deshawn Coy in 2021, the agenda of the original People's Party is to create an alternative model for development of Black African people of the diaspora and the continent under a race-first pan-Africanist ideology through collective economic development, machine building skills training for manufacturing, and monetary systems to transact and finance our developmental efforts.
Yes.
And I have a quick question about that. There was a guy that came on a while back. His name was Taye Uhuru. And he's traveled all over, lived in like over 60 countries. And he was talking about living in Africa and what he experienced there. He's originally from Ohio, but he said that he really feels like Black people need to start doing, I forget the term, but basically he was saying that Black people need to start building our own sustainable communities the same way that you see where like you go to New York and there's like a little Italy and there's a Chinatown and there's there's like Jewish neighborhoods. And I lived in a Jewish neighborhood when I lived in Brooklyn for a short time. And one of the things I noticed is everything in the community was owned by the people in the community. All the stores, all the shops, everything. So every time they turned the dollar in that neighborhood, the money stayed in the neighborhood, stayed in the community. What's your opinion about that? Is that something that we could do? Because we had that before in the United States. We had like several like Black Wall Streets, people burned them down, but we had that happen before. Do you think that's a possibility again?
Yeah, and I'm gonna explain when we start going to the agenda portion how we could actually do that. But I think that's something that it is possible. But you have to also remind that these communities that you mentioned, they already had a head start historically, where they had either access to capital or they have some type of manufacturing or some type of base where they can leverage that to be able to build up their products and their services in their respective communities, and then also have an advantage to have bought their land decades prior on houses, not just land, but also houses and stuff like that. So they have a much different advantage compared to the Black community. And also, like what you said, like Black Wall Street and stuff like that, they were also burned down. That was number one. And also number two, that because they were capitalist oriented, it was only beneficial to a certain class of people or group of Black people that was even able to do it. And I'm going to explain later on when we start going to the agenda point of how the worker cooperative model that we're going to apply, and then how the infra project and later, and et cetera, is going to kind of broaden that type of solution with point that you just made, and how it's going to be able to help the community more broadly based outside of just a capitalist model. So yes,
okay,
I agree with you.
Let me go to the agenda part because this was really interesting. Let me make sure I'm sharing the right screen. Of course,
Yeah,
I'm
you just
not. StreamYard's weird like that.
No problem.
Agenda. Okay. So here's the agenda, and I want to go down to, okay, so the first item on the agenda is collective economic development. Build an alternative model that shares equity amongst workers. You want me to click on this?
Yeah, you can click on it if you want. Because I'm not sure if they can read it, but you can still click on it. Click on it.
Okay. Okay. Deshawn, can you talk a little bit about this?
Yeah. So the alternative model that we're going to be doing is called worker cooperatives. Well, whereas the workforce who's producing the products or the services or the retail or stuff like that, they're going to be the primary owners of the respective businesses that they're operating in. Compared to in a capitalist model where essentially you would have an employer and that employer is going to be essentially um, giving you a wage, and then for a wage, you give them their output or the service that they use to go sell, and then whatever's generated in profit is mostly stays with them for the most part. And so let's say for example, you may get like $40,000 for a year, at McDonald's or stuff like that. That's generous anyway, 35,000 because sometimes 30,000, but particularly that's on average what you would get. But in gross profit, like for the year, you may get only, let's say, $100 for the year in bonuses. Just to use that example. But in this cooperative model, is that the workforce or the people who's working at McDonald's, who is cooking the burgers, who's helping deliver the food, those cooks or those people at the cashiers and stuff like that would make up the overall workforce of the business, of workforce of the business. And so not only they only get whatever, let's say the 40,000 that they get for the whole year, but also you get a stake, either 5%, 10% of the overall gross profits that's generated for the year. So let's say if it's 100,000, and then there's 5% or 10% split amongst 10 workers. As a worker owner, you would have a stake in that. So it's not just a stake staying, all of the profit staying with the owner. You know what I'm saying? Just one owner,
Mm-hmm.
and it's shared. It's spread, and that type of model will help spread up the equity and the equity or the profits that's generated each year, and and kind of lessen the inequality and stuff like that, or the exploitation between the employer and the employee. You know what I'm saying? If I hopefully that explains.
So this would kind of be like more like where we lean towards with socialism, where we feel like the owner or excuse me, the worker should be able to own a piece of their work.
Exactly, because the workforce typically, historically, the workers is what help produce the phone that we have right here, or the pen that we use and stuff like that. So the value that they create, or that they bring to the raw material or to the actual output that's being sold, the workers typically never see. I won't say never, but the closest that they would see is probably in the form of a bonus for the year. So like maybe $100 for the whole year, typically. That's maybe $100 for the year, because I know I work in security, and that's probably the closest I would get in a other bonus. So that's kind of good. But in a worker cooperative model, if you're producing these phones or producing whatever items, you get a stake in that actual business, and you would also not just get a stake financially, but also you would have to say in the overall operations. So from the type of machines you choose to use, from the type of technology you choose to use, how do you organize the workplace, to stuff like that. You elect your supervisors, the managers, and stuff like that. The collective workforce, or that 10 people I just mentioned in the McDonald's example, will help elect who's the manager, who help elect who the supervisor is, select what machineries or technologies we would use, and then how do we help have a thriving business and stuff like that, or consistent business and stuff like that. That's not based on maximizing profits to the bone to cut people's wages and et cetera, et cetera.
No, these are all really good points because I think a lot of us we go to work and we don't have much say so. I mean, I know I show up.
Exactly.
I do what I'm supposed to do when I go home.
hmm I work in security, and that's basically it. Because it's not you don't really get no say in how to organize the workplace. You don't get any share of the or the contracts that's being thing. You just get your wage. I'm lucky to have benefits, a little bit of benefits anyway. So that's pretty much what you get. But on the average, most workers don't even have a say in what they're operating. Not just in the operation, but also a share in the profits generated, basically, and that continues the exploitation over and over and over. So that's kind of the idea of the worker cooperatives, of what the purpose of the collective economic program.
No, I really like this idea. I want to get to the next one. on the agenda as well.
Uh-huh. And I'm gonna explain how the cooperative model will tie into the infra project next.
Awesome. So this one is the infra project, develop machinery for manufacturing and skill training for members. Let's hear about that.
Yeah, you could click that, or because you have to close the screen and then bring it back or something like that. All right.
Oh yeah,
Yeah,
that's
you could,
right.
yeah.
Man, StreamYard, man. Okay, that's an adjustment they need to
I use StreamYard, yeah. But
make.
but
We go.
I'll start it off. Um, the purpose of the infra project is essentially what we're going to be doing is we're going to be developing the machineries that creates the output that we sell in the cooperatives. Now, the reason why that's going to be relevant is because by having control of those machineries, it's going to lessen our dependency on having to raise capital or raising funds from either capitalist entities or like banks, let's say like a JP Morgan or like a Capital One. We don't have to depend on it because once we have the machineries and the technology, it'll enable us to be able to not only control the output, what we control, that we produce, that we sell, or I forgot. Yeah, and control the price point on what we sell. So it'll enable us to be able to produce the products at much cheaper, and much cheaper. So let's say that if we had if we were selling these pens, right, and I had the machines to help produce these pens, it'll enable us to be able to. And also, I'm gonna explain how it's going to become cheaper in the next one, in the last agenda point. But basically, the machinery is what's going to help us be able to produce these things that we need essentially. So we don't have to go raise money to go buy those machines from existing, whether it's in China or here in America or whatever, stuff like that, and then go into deep and debt and interest to continue paying those to pay for those machineries or those type of technologies and stuff like that that we don't have access to for the most part. And the second part of the agenda of the infra project is that the members that's coming into the group or to the organization, we're going to be looking to help either recruit people who's already engineers, technicians, or stuff like that, or we're going to help train them to do in those fields. And the reason why is going to help train them to do that is going to connect into the last part when it comes to currency or the monetary system. But by us being able to control to have those engineers and stuff like that, it's going to enable us to be able to self-produce these things inside our organization and be able to control the machineries in either, whether it's here, it could be in Africa, or it could be in the Caribbean, depending on wherever we want. But by having that access to there, it'll be able to, like I said before, control the price point on it, and then the ability to be able to produce the things that we sell and stuff like that. So
Yeah, that's very important. I mean, I like what I'm hearing because this is part of the problem that we run into with Amazon, where like this is why they've bought so many people out. It's like they are basically taking over a lot of like businesses, and people, it's getting to the point where people are heavily relying on them. We have to have our own form of production. And
and
yeah.
oh, sorry, yeah, sorry to cut you off. Yeah, but but the reason why, to explain why people companies like not just Amazon but also Walmart, the reason why they're able to do these things is because they're able to, because back in the late 70s or in the 80s, the country started exporting those manufacturing jobs over to China and Asia, and by exporting it over there, it would enable them to be able to produce things much cheaper. So because like a large company like a Walmart, or today like a Amazon, because they have such market capitalization and much basically market capitalization, where they have the income to where they can buy cheap goods at cheaper prices overseas, they can basically squeeze out any competition, whether it's a smaller a mom and pop shop or any type of local small businesses. They can crush them because not only they have the capital to go produce these things, but they can lower it so drastically and then just drive you out of business. That's why a company like Amazon can do that. And then because Amazon is basically like Walmart, but just on the internet anyway. It's just cheaper prices online, and then you can get the benefits of delivery and stuff like that. But the key difference of why they're able to do these things is because of the cheap products that they can get from China. where they can get those cheap products and then be able to sell it at a markup price up here and stuff like that. That's the reason why they're able to do that. Like the point, just to piggyback on the point where you made about Amazon.
Yeah, Radical Leftist Agenda said general strike. I want to get your opinion about that as well, because there is a general strike scheduled for October 15th this year. Um,
Hmm.
I I'm all for general strike myself, but after I looked over things on the website, I don't feel like that's enough time for us to get things ready to. Personally feel
Yeah,
like we need more time to come up with mutual aid.
yeah. I think a general strike should use, but I think because like how I just explained before, with the manufacturing or the leverage, the the capitalist system also understands that they don't have to negotiate with you. They can just wait. They can just wait and kind of breed you out. You know, there was this article that I saw last year on the Wall Street Journal where there's this guy in I think it was in the Hamptons, and he was just an investor, and then he was kind of commenting on the on the protest and all of the marching and that was going on, right? And basically what he was saying is that, you know, that's all nice and stuff like that. You can continue doing that, but we can just essentially just wait it out. We'll wait it out, and then by the election, by the time the election's over, it'll all go back to normal. And the reason why I brought that up is because with a general strike, if from my understanding of what I've read and things I've seen, all they have to really do is just wait it out for like a general strike, because essentially they control. They understand that the capitalists and the elites, they know that they control essentially all of our living conditions. They control the energy, they control the electricity, they control your Wi-Fi, your internet, they control all of these different things. So they already know that a strike is not going to last out long, not that long, because you're going to eventually have to go pay your mortgage. You're going to have to go back and pay your thing. So eventually they know that they're going to come back. So even though I think a general strike. Sorry if I'm talking too long, but yeah,
No, go ahead.
yeah. So yes, I think a general strike is necessary to, you know, to at least apply some pressure. I think something of a stronger alternative like the program that we're adopting here, something that's more better for long term, so we don't have to depend on the white power structure or its capitalist system or different stuff like that. So, but I still agree, we still do the general strike.
Yeah, I mean, my thing is guys, I hope you like take heed to what he was saying about the production, because that's very important. Like, we don't control the means of the production. As long as they control the means of the production, they have the power. So that has to change. We have to start producing our own products. We have to start like, and this goes back to even with food, because RJ had a guy on recently, he was talking about how to grow your own food. I highly recommend that you go back and watch that episode, because there's going to come a time when we're going to need to, if we want to really be serious about this, not depend on these larger corporations, not depend on their production. We're going to have to learn how to do these things ourselves. And this is also why I think it's unfortunate that our government is not investing in trade schools the way that they used to. There used to be a time when people like that was like it was a good positive thing. We have switched our way of thinking to, you need to go to the 4-year academic collegiate system, where in the past there were times when trade schools were actually considered very valuable. And I think we need to get back to that so people know how to build things and create their own stuff.
Yeah, and I think that's all part of the like privatization, like post 1970. I think that's
Mhm.
more of a privatization where everything is like for profit. Where education for like those trade schools, you have to go into debt or get a loan to be able to get those skills and stuff like that. Whereas before it was something like in our generation or grandparents generation, it was part of like a high school curriculum where they learn those type of skills. But now that everything is privatized, where you have to go pay for those things, you have to go into debt to do these things. That's something that we're going to be a part of the infra project, where we're going to add it into when we can start generating revenue. We're going to be looking to help pay for members to be able to get those trade skills and stuff like that. So yeah, I most definitely agree.
Absolutely, because they used to teach these. My parents told me about this. They used to have like wood shop. They had like, I had home ec in middle school. Didn't have it like after that, but they used to teach that just a part of the regular high school curriculum.
Hmm. But if it makes money to charge people to learn how to build a house or build those things, you can make more money on it. So that's all part of privatization, making money. basically those such a capitalism. So yeah.
That's a good point. I want to go back to the website and talk about the monetary. Um,
Yeah.
I pulled this up.
Yeah.
Monetary systems, develop systems to exchange and finance our development.
Yes. So there's no particular article for that because I just kind of use that as like self-explanatory. But the purpose of that is going to be creating our own currency, because by creating our own currency, in my opinion, it'll enable us to not have to keep depending on the capitalist system to be, or like the Federal Reserve to be able to provide capital, whether it's the Federal Reserve or the banks that they lend to, whether it's J.P. Morgan, Goldman Sachs, or whatever. And the reason for that is because once we have because once we have the ability to have our own currency, it'll enable us to be able to finance these type of things. But I'm gonna explain how that's going to work, because this plan, or like creating our own monetary system or like our own currency, is going to be really tied in or contingent on the infra project, because without the machineries, is not our own currency is not going to have much value, because basically what we produce in the currency, I'm sorry, in the infra project or the machineries, whether it's producing this pen, whether it's producing like sheetrock or like cement or this type of items, there's not going to be much value for the currency when we trade, whether it's for US dollars or whatever. There's not going to be much value for it. So everything is really for this plan to work is going to be really dependent on the infra project and our productive ability, where we develop the machineries, we develop the manufacturing, and that's going to be really where that's really dependent on.
Okay. There is one thing I wanted to ask about in reference to this. Let me come out, stop sharing my screen. Number one, like, how did you start all this? Like, did you come up with all this yourself, or is there like a team?
Yeah, I came up with this myself because it came through like a process. Like, let me go back a couple of years first, because there was a book that I read. Like, you ever heard of Dr. Claude Anderson?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, there's a book that I read called called Powernomics, right? And through that book is what I kind of got the basis of what I'm doing right now, where I kind of understand how to build an economy, how do you build a political system, and how do you use that to accrue power at the media level, at the educational level, and all these type of things. But the problem is, what I came into is that some of the colleagues in the Pan African community that I kind of came into, they were kind of telling me that this was like, it's a very capitalist type of thing. Even though when I read the book, it's not really, because Dr. Claude Anderson doesn't explicitly say that. Even though in interviews he says that, but basically what they were using in the argument, kind of saying like it's very capitalist. It's not really something that you could apply to, because we don't have access to capital or money to be able to go spend and stuff like that. And then even if you start a business, you're gonna be able to charge so much. You're gonna have to charge a lot of money, because you don't really have the access to the supply chain, like how I mentioned in the infra project.
Mm-hmm.
Like how I mentioned, you don't have the access to supply chain to be able to control those costs, to where you can sell this pen at a cheaper price to your customer. So I had to go through like a process over the last 2 years, where I kind of try to figure out, okay, if this type of model, like what Dr. Claude Anderson put in Powernomics, how do you solve that model, that capitalist issue, where you can use a better system, or like what is the better system to apply to it? That's where I came up with the worker cooperative model. There's a book from, you ever Jessica Gordon Nemhard? You ever heard of her?
I haven't.
Her book called Collective Courage, and that's where I kind of got the idea from the worker cooperatives. She wrote that book a few years ago, and then she discussed the history of cooperatives from W.E. Du Bois for the last 200 years here in this country about worker cooperatives, and that's where I kind of researched the cooperative concept. So there's a company that's called, you ever heard of Mondragon?
Yep.
Mondragon, yeah. So there's a company that's called Mondragon in Spain. So I kind of researched Mondragon and different other examples to kind of get to this type of model, or kind of get to that type of thing. So that's kind of where I got the information from that. And then through the last couple of years, figuring out how does our supply chain work, how does manufacturing work, how does, like, where does these things even come from? So it took a few books that I wrote, like a few books. Like if you look in the back of my wall, I have like a few books that I kind of read to get that information. Number one, there's a book called Kwame Nkrumah's Neocolonialism. I'm not sure if you heard of that. Walter Rodney's How Europe Underdeveloped Africa, and another book called Eric Williams' Capitalism and Slavery. And the last one, if I remember, is I think it's called I'm sorry, it's blanking. Jekyll's Island, A Creature from Jekyll's Island.
Yep.
Yeah, that those are the few books that I kind of grab most of these informations and stuff like that to kind of come up with the solution and the agenda for the original People's Party. That's where I got that information. And I think someone in the chat put it. Eric. Eric Thomas, yeah, he put. That's where I got the information from.
Okay.
So that's where I got all of these ideas, where I'll be able to put it together on my mind and kind of put it out, as an agenda point of the original People's Party.
Okay, thanks so much for putting that in the chat, Eric, so everyone can check out that book. Dark Goblin said, I've been thinking about this for a while. In my opinion, capitalism gets a bad rep because it's fascist. We need to get control of the money.
Yeah, but that's the question, because that's what I had to, like last year or the year before, where I had to figure out what is the value of money. And when I like the book I just mentioned, The Creatures from Jekyll Island, that book basically tied into what I was already reading in Nkrumah's book, Rodney's book, and Williams' book, where it kind of discussed how these things even how does even like a US dollar even get its value from. And to answer the question, the value, it comes from the actual products that's being sold, like this pen, the phone, and stuff like that. And to break it down, basically what those things come from is basically the raw materials, number one, the raw materials that get converted into machineries, and then those machineries is what produce the products, and then those products is what is being sold in the market, stuff like that. Now that's the simple version. If I were to go more deep into it, you want to get into like foreign exchange values, the amount of technology you have, stuff like that. It gets really complicated, stuff like that. So, but it gets really really deep. But I do agree with the question, like where's the money? Like you have to control the money, but
So for people who want to get involved, I'm gonna pull this up on the website too. What are we'll go over like the requirements.
Yeah.
Share. All right, membership requirements. Can you walk us through these?
Yeah. So as a Pan-Africanist organization, we're primarily looking for people of Black African descent to join the organization. Now the reason for that is because we're looking to have a constituency that's kind of can grow together and be able to stick together. And I know that this is a leftist platform, so some of your audience may not agree with some of those ideas and stuff like that. But in my opinion, and similar to the work that I read from Dr. Amos Wilson and others, my belief is that as we start growing, we can build a much consistent base or a workforce or like member base or like constituency amongst people in our own race. Because not just how I just mentioned from like, let's say the original people's concept where we as the original man, we all originate from Africa, we have a similar historical condition and stuff like that. So this is why I take the position that we can be able to build a more consistent constituency through a race first or philosophy. But that doesn't mean that we're not going to work with other groups and stuff like that, or partner and stuff like that, or ally and stuff like that. But that's primarily what we're looking for in terms of like the qualifiers. And that's pretty much it. As long as you're like over 18, if you have criminal records for the time being, we're kind of disqualifying that because we don't have the resources yet to be able to vet people who's coming into the group. The next one is the law enforcement military thing. I could go more in depth if you have more question on that, but basically just for informants type of things. You familiar with COINTELPRO?
Yeah, I can understand why you don't want. I mean, my parents were military, so I can understand why.
Yeah. So that's I can explain more if your audience have a question on that, but that's primary reason. But Yeah, so as long as you're over the age of 18, not like we don't want younger people, but people over 18, um, if you don't have the experience in like in engineering or let's say construction or different type of skill sets, then you can still join. It doesn't matter because we're going to be looking to help train people anyway. So we're going to help pay for their education anyway. So that's part of the idea. So if you want to join, like you could go on ogpeoples.org and then you could just click the join button and then you could just fill out the form from there and stuff like that. So that's pretty much the primary criteria and stuff like that. If you have a love for Black people, especially for the people here in this country, like I'm not sure if you heard of the ADOS movement. I'm not sure.
Yep.
Yeah, the ADOS movement, the B1 movement, and all these type of things. So if you're intending to stay here in this country and you want to build here, so I would expect you guys to come join this organization because we're looking for because we're going to be developing the manufacturing because the workforce that we're going to need our people here. That's going to be to be able to help train them and be able to develop the system that we need over here. And then we're going to basically everything I just explained, we're going to be doing over in the continent also. So later on, when you join the organization, you're going to see how it's all going to come together anyway.
So there's one question in the chat that has come up in reference to straight and heterosexual. What is the reason for that?
Yeah, because we're going to be primarily socially going to be building between Black men and Black women.
Okay.
Yeah.
But like if
whatever preferences maybe people have, that's going to be between just for their privacy. But we are going to be looking to build primarily between Black men and Black women.
And what is the only reason why I have to push back on that is because that does remove a segment of the population, like Black people that are LGBTQ. That's removing that segment of the population. So I just have to, I got to push back on that because I think that that's going to. I guess what I'm asking is I'm just
no, I
not
understand.
sure.
You're correct on that. But that's going to be something that we're going to be looking to do.
Okay.
So if it is something that's like a red line for some people, because when I was doing some recruiting over the last year, I've had about two or three people who kind of give me that red line where that's kind of like a barrier where they don't really feel comfortable with that. Similar to like religion, we have certain people who were Christians and Muslims. They don't really like the idea of like a race first thing. They kind of view things like that. So there is going to be certain red lines where people may not want to join and stuff like that. So when it comes to the sexual orientation thing, that's maybe something people who may not like the idea.
Yeah, I just want to say I don't understand why their sexuality would prevent them from fighting for these causes.
Well, it depends on what they're comfortable with. Are they expecting to, or do they feel comfortable with that? That's the question.
Yeah.
Hmm.
Can I just offer just like a tip just from me. I do know that when it comes to like African American community, one of the big taboos is sexuality and there's and homophobia, and it's been a problem. And I just personally don't feel like as much pressure and as much discrimination that we get just from being Black, I don't think that we should discriminate against other people because of their sexuality, because we know what it's like to be discriminated against. I personally, if my recommendation, I would remove that. That's just my take on that. I think if you're bringing Black people in, it needs to be all Black people. I don't think that you should exclude people based on their sexuality because Black people that are LGBTQ, they already get enough of that. They get it from the church, they get it from the community. And I think if you're going to build something like this, you got to bring all Black people in.
Well, yeah, I understand, but the objective is to build between Black men and Black women. So let's say, for example, if you are someone who is like gay, bisexual, or lesbian, if it is something that's a problem, you can just remove yourself from the thing. So it's just really up to you what you guys are open to. So it's not something that we're excluding people from, but if it's something that you feel uncomfortable where it's the primary orientation is going to be between black men and black women, it could be up to people who may if it's something like a red line for them. If it's red line for them, it could be up to them to make that choice.
Oh, so what you're saying is, I just want to make sure I have this right. So what you're saying is people.
So let's say it's someone like let's say bisexual, right? And they have their preferences and stuff like that. They can still join. They can still join if you're gay or stuff like that. But if you see, like, let's say for example, like when we have start developing speakers and leaders within the group, if you're someone that's gay and stuff like that, and then you're listening to hear about how black men and black women, and then you're hearing black love and all these type of things, and then you're hearing these type of things, you may naturally not be one to be part of it because you're not going to be feeling inclusive and stuff like that. So there's not going to be any type of like homophobic rhetoric or any type of thing that you're going to hear. But it is going to be something that if it's like if you're seeing yourself in the near future with being someone who's let's say gay or lesbian, or like that's going to be your partner, then it's probably going to be something that you may have to consider. That's something.
Okay, so what I recommend, like, I would reword that, because if I'm just looking at the website, that to me that says to me that if someone's gay, they can't, like, if a gay person's reading that, they're going to see that and be like, oh, I'm gay, I can't join. They may take it the wrong way. So I highly recommend rewording that, because that's the first like instinct I have,
That's understandable. Yeah.
Okay. I gotta look out for the people. Like I just
no, but it's something that people are gonna have to be able to yeah. And I know a lot of the people in the comments they say that it went south quickly, but it is something that I have to tell people on the upfront. So
yeah, I see love as love, so I think that I think it's better for us to embrace each other and be inclusive of each other, because it's sometimes certain requirements prevents us from building a movement. And I've run into this with other groups, like other organizations. They'll reach out and say, hey, do you want to participate? And I'm like, yeah, I'll do this. And then they'll have like these requirements that like it'll push other people out that really want to be involved and really want to help.
Yeah. And I agree, but I think naturally there's going to be differences when you do build movements, because certain people may not share the same ideology and philosophy, and also the way that they're going to organize their lives in the future. So to kind of like sugarcoat that and try to tell them that, oh yeah, you're going to join this movement, but really I'm a capitalist, and say that I'm a capitalist and then I want to privatize all these type of things. You know what I'm saying? So it is important to tell people, like, when you're building movements, I think it's more important to have a strong ideological growth thing, so that it eliminates conflict later on and stuff like that. So I understand what you mean, though.
Yeah, like if we think back to like Bernie's campaign, like one of the things I can tell you is that when I was like at Bernie's rally, I'm looking around me and I'm realizing that had it not been for that movement, I would have never met half of those people. And after Bernie like dropped out, I had to say to myself, like, Bernie had this way, and don't get me wrong, he's got his faults too. I'm not too happy with him right now. But Bernie had this way of bringing people together that had it not been for the issues that he was fighting for, we would have never been brought together. I would have never met those people. We didn't work together. We didn't live in the same neighborhood. We didn't have much in common except for those issues that he was fighting for. So I would hate to see people turned away just because of sexuality, how they identify. I feel like that's personal. And I don't feel like we should go down that road. I just gotta be honest.
That's understand.
Okay, so with that though, I will say I do understand, like, when it comes to disqualifiers, I get where you're coming from with the criminal records, because like you're right, you have to have the tools and the resources to be able to vet for those people, and that's not always doable. And I definitely, of course, I understand about law enforcement, because God knows, I've said this before, I'll say it again, cops are cops first.
Yeah. So to go on the criminal record thing, because what we discussed so far in the group is that we will kind of reevaluate later on when we have more resources where we can properly evaluate people who may have, like, let's say a misdemeanor or like a felony and stuff like that, because I don't think we want to exclude that type of population where we have masses of our people in the prison system. So I don't think that's something that I think later on we're going to vote, but we're going to have more resources where we can evaluate them, stuff like that. Because once people start getting equity and stuff, and you're dealing with people's money and then their jobs, they want to make sure that they feel comfortable with you handling their money and being able to secure their things. So that's the criminal thing, the reason for the criminal thing. And the law enforcement, I think that's kind of self-explanatory. Because if you're familiar with COINTELPRO, you're kind of familiar with informants, you're kind of familiar with how political assassinations, you kind of see how all these different types of, because based on my reading and like my familiarity with history, you kind of know, like, if you start paying attention, you start seeing how these different types of individuals all come from the law enforcement background or military background. To give like an example, like you're familiar with Malcolm X, right?
Yep.
Yeah. So Malcolm, so like if you ever heard of a guy named like Gene Roberts?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So Gene Roberts was one of the informants who was part of his organization, but he was a police officer. But he was discovered like 10 years later after Malcolm's passing, where he was kind of like identified as an informant. So that's one. That's one. And another one in Africa, if you're familiar with Patrice Lumumba.
Mm-hmm.
The man that killed him, what's his name, was his last name was, I think, Mobutu. Mobutu. You heard of him? You ever heard of Joseph Mobutu?
Not familiar with him.
Yeah, but he what came out later is that he was part of the Belgian military. He was trained as a Belgian military officer who then joined Lumumba's party, and then later on he would play the key role in the CIA's role in assassinating Lumumba. But if you kind of go over these histories, you kind of see how these different patterns. I could go more in depth later on, but at a different time. But you see how these people come from the law enforcement or military background, where they kind of get these type of backgrounds, and how they could potentially become problematic later on.
Yeah. Danny said law enforcement preys on ex-convicts to use them as infiltrators.
Yeah, and that's another example. Uh-huh.
That can happen. James Roop had a question.
I think Fred Hampton. Sorry. Fred Hampton wasn't the guy. What's his name? Damn, I'm forgetting. William something.
Yep.
He was an ex-convict for some petty crime or whatever, and they would use him as an informant. So that's another reason for the thing. Yeah. Sorry, the question. Yeah.
James had a quick question. So wait a minute. If you're thrown in jail for drug possession in like 1999, you're out. I think it was I think you said like recent convictions, right?
Yeah. No, it's not something like that. I'm saying later on when we get more resources to evaluate it, because there's about 20 of us here in New York, between New York and Georgia. So there's not, until we get the resources to evaluate people who may have a misdemeanor or like a felony or something like that. That's what I basically mean. It's not just excluding all of them. You know what I'm saying? No. And
okay.
Just like Eric Thomas saying like ex-cons should be supported. Yeah, most definitely. As long as you have like a track record after prison, that you're not going back into trouble and stuff like that. That's kind of yeah.
Okay. Well, I want to thank you for coming on and educating everybody about Original People's Party. I actually have another live stream I have to go into. I was in the wrong one.
Yeah, sorry.
This is why I was late.
No problem.
But for educating us about this, I definitely do feel that we need to come up with our own means of production. We need to have workers, own part of their work. Like I know people have been advocating for that for a long time. And so, yeah, I definitely, I hear where you're coming from with this. I don't really agree with you on some of the social things though, but just
but before we end off, the people in the comments, or just particularly you, if you guys feel some type of way about that social thing, you guys could try to adopt these type of ideas, because we're not going to have like a monopoly on these, like the cooperative model or the different project. If you think you can be able to implement these type of things under your idea, your ideal social setting that you're going to be you prefer, you guys could use these type of you adopt these type of ideas things, because these things could be replicable in your own thing, because these social requirements that we may have, as a leftist, you may could adopt it for yourself, or other organizations that you do. Because realistically, to be honest, we're not going to be able to do all of the machinery and all of that manufacturing all right away. So as an organization, you guys could, or other groups that you guys may have, or like Fred Hampton Leftists or others, you can be able to help adopt some of these ideas and implement it yourself also. Mm-hmm.
Thank you so much for your time, Deshawn.
Yeah, no problem. And thank you. I appreciate you giving me your opportunity. Thank you.
Bye.
All right, take care. Is it over? Oh, I'm not sure. Is it over?